Today is November 8th. So what I have going on is I've got my chapter 4. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It's about Fortnite.
So Fortnite, okay. You think it's more important than my class?
No.
Okay. My feelings were going to be really hurt. Okay. Now though, Abby's right that it has been recording, so now everyone gets to know that we talked about Fortnite today. On November 8th, because I did also announce the date. So I'm just downloading my notes. You guys all have yours on paper, but if for any reason you do need them online, they are online. Your homework is also online. I will make sure to update that as we do more stuff. Okay, so today we're in chapter 4. And we are talking about congruent figures. So we're talking about these polygons. We're talking about all of these different shapes. We're talking about what we're going to write when we're congruent to each other. I just got to pull something really quick. Okay. So first thing that we're going to think about is my definition of two polygons being congruent. Okay. Two polygons are said to be congruent if and only if there's a way, this is going to be a long definition, there is a way to match, the vertices. We're not even close to being done. There's a way to match the vertices so that all corresponding sides and all corresponding angles are congruent. So far I've said there's a way to match the vertices so that all corresponding sides and
Angles.
all corresponding angles are what?
Congruent.
Congruent. Great.
Nolan got it.
Nolan got that right. Everyone on YouTube, Nolan got that right. Okay. I want you to remind me really quick, what does that IFF stand for?
If and only if.
If and only if. Amazing. And then remind me, what does congruent mean? I feel like we know this word well enough now, but how do we define congruent? They're equal, same measure, equal angles, or equal measures. Okay. So for this next one, it says write a bring it back. Okay. The next one says write a congruency statement for each triangle. Identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts. Okay, let's start by doing angles and sides. Okay, so tell me what angle is congruent to angle A?
P.
What angle is congruent to angle A?
P.
P. Why is it P as in person? They've got 3 little congruent marks. Good. So A has 3 little congruent marks. P has 3 little congruent marks. Okay. Same idea. Now what about angle B as in boy? What is that congruent to? Q. Q is in quilt, I guess is an easy way to do. And why are they congruent? They only have 2 lines. Good. It's not that hard. Angle C is going to be congruent to R. Very good. R. Because they only have how many congruent marks? 1. Very good. C is congruent to angle R. Okay, awesome. Now we're going to do sides, okay? And today it matters what order you write the letters in, okay? So when I write AB, I'm very intentional about writing A first and B second. What side is congruent to AB? Good. We're looking at the same thing. Why do I want it to be PQ, Gia?
Because it's like A, start with A and that has 3, and so P has 3.
Good. We have to make sure when we do the sides that the angles are in this right spot. Okay, so if we went from A to B, we have to go from P because that's congruent to A to Q because that's congruent to B. Okay, so is congruent to PQ. Notice that I've got little hats on them because they're all congruent. All right, what about if I said BC? What's congruent to BC?
QR.
QR, very good. QR. And then same idea, let's call this next one AC. What if I call the last one AC? What's A congruent to?
PR.
PR, very good. How are we feeling about that, okay? Now, it does say write the congruency statement, and the congruency statement is triangle something or quadrilateral something is congruent to the other one, okay? So based on all this information, I'm gonna write my congruency statement. I'm gonna say triangle something is congruent to triangle something else, okay?
Triangle.
Good, you go ahead. List the first one.
Triangle ABC
Good,
is congruent to triangle. Is congruent to PQR
PQR, good. Why did I know that P went first?
because. I said. Alphabetical.
Not necessarily alphabetical order.
Depending on which one you start with.
Well,
The first one, A has three congruent lines, and then down to whatever the congruent.
Good. Whatever you start with, and did Nolan have to start with ABC? No, he could have said BAC, he could have said CBA, he could have used any order of those letters, but because he started with ABC, we had to list the angle that was congruent to A first, which is P. Then we had to list the angle that was congruent to B, which is Q, and then we had to list the angle that was congruent to C, which is R. Okay. So I got a lot of lines and stuff on this picture. Great job. Okay, that is all I need from that one, but this right here is my congruency statement, okay? So if I ask for a congruency statement, I want this shape is congruent to that shape, okay? That was me giving you the picture and we had to write the statement. Notice that the next one is the statement and we have to label our picture. Okay, so we're gonna go label this picture. This is a great time for highlighters or just, even if you're just using a pencil, we're just gonna have to use like 2 or 3 different little marks so that we can tell the angles apart, okay? So this congruency statement says DEGFG is congruent to KLMN. What's one pair of angles that are congruent to each other? What angle is congruent to D? Okay, awesome. We're gonna pause, we're gonna go to our picture, we're gonna just put one little line for D and K. If you're using a highlighter, feel free to just use that highlighter to mark them. If you're using a pen or a pencil, that is also okay, but you just want one little congruent mark to show that those guys are congruent.
How do you know that?
Because they're both first. Because my congruent statement is already written, I know that if they're congruent, the first angles are congruent and on and on. So then that being said, what is congruent to angle E?
L.
L, awesome. Pause what we're doing, go over here, let's mark E and L congruent. Again, if you're using your highlighter, feel free to just use that. If you're using a pen or a pencil, you may need 2 marks now. Hint, one of them is gonna have 4 marks, so that's why I switched to a smaller pen so that you could see those pretty easily. Okay. And then F is congruent to M, and then G is congruent to N. Very good. So go ahead, pause, label those. Who waited me? All right, everybody good. You all have your picture labels with your angles so far. Oh, wait a second. The next thing we're gonna do is label our sides as congruent. Notice that the ones that are next to each other or are in a certain order don't necessarily match up. So like my top left angles are not congruent. My top right angles are not congruent. That sometimes they are, but not always. That's why we had to use our congruent statement in order to know what was true, okay? What I want to do now is label our sides. So you just pick any side to start with. So I'm going to start with the side DE because that's between like angle 1 and angle 2 essentially. So I'm going to put 1 congruent line for that segment. What am I going to mark as congruent to DE? KL, good. I like that you listed it KL because K and D go together, E and L go together. Then you can just kind of work yourself around the shape. I'm gonna do EF next. What segment is congruent to EF? What segment? LM. Good. What's congruent to FG? MN. Very good. I like how intentional we are. And then that last one, DG, is congruent to the last side. I said DG, so I would say KN for the last side. All right, the reason I wanted to stop and mark everything as congruent is the next part of this asks us to find the value of X and the value of Y. And I just wanted to mark what was very clearly congruent, so it's really easy to set up and find X and Y. Okay, so first thing we'll do is find X. So X, where is X? Where's X at? Good, 5X plus 2. Good, which number is that congruent to? Which side is congruent to the side that's labeled 5X? Good, and that's equal to? Good, and there are, so yes, I like that we said it that way, so I'll put it that way. So I'll say NM is equal to G. If they're equal, then that means that you can set their expressions, their numbers equal to each other. So I can say 5X plus 2 is equal to 12. And then we can solve that. Minus 2 from both sides. I get 10, divide by 5, I get 2. So X equals 2. Is everybody okay with that so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to do Y. We're going to find Y out. Which angle has Y in it? 5Y plus 6, and that's an angle L. So I'm going to say measure of angle L is equal to what other angle?
Yeah.
Just one letter because it's an angle. E, very good. Angle E, measure of angle E is equal to measure of angle L. And so we're going to set those equal to each other. So L is at 5Y plus 6, and then E is 111. Am I moving too fast, or is everybody with me? Everyone's doing okay? Okay. Minus that 6 from both sides, and I get 105, and I divide by 5, and I get 21. Okay, we doing okay so far? All right, let's keep going. Theorem 4.3, third angle theorem. Okay, this is kind of one of those oh duh theorems that, like, once you say it, you're like, ah, that does make sense. But it's something that maybe you don't know off the top of your head right now. It says if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then something is true. Okay, so we're gonna say that angle A and D are congruent. Let's give them a measure. What should angle A and D be? Let's just give them a random measure. Let's say, like, I don't know, 40. Perfect. All right, B and E are also congruent. Let's give them a measure. What should they be? 6. Sure. I know. Yeah, that's fine. We could do 52. That's going to make the next step harder, but that's okay. We'll do 52.
Oh, never mind.
Oh.
Never mind.
I mean, just a tiny bit harder. We'll do 60. I think that'll make it nice and easy. It won't look right, but I just need you to trust me, okay? So this we'll call 60. Doesn't really matter. Okay. What would angle C be? 80. How'd you get that? They add up to 180. So Mike says, okay, all of the angles in ABC should add up to 180. And we already have 100 degrees going. So that means C must be 80. Okay, it's not to scales. Everybody's okay with that? Everyone's chill with it not being to scale? Okay. What should angle F be? 80 why? Oh, we don't know that yet. It also needs to equal 180. But Gia, you led me up to write what I'm about to say. They are not congruent just because. They're congruent because the other two are congruent, and then in order to get that third angle, you got to subtract from 180. So then by that nature, that means that my third angles are congruent. Third angles are congruent. So if A is congruent to B or D, and angle B is congruent to angle E, Then what is? Angle C is congruent to angle F. Thank you. Great job. Okay. All right, this next one says if two angles have three pairs of congruent angles, then must the triangles be congruent? Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of just brain thinking. Okay, draw two triangles for me, and make sure that they have congruent angles, or as best as you can. Mine are not gonna be perfect, but they're gonna be good enough. We're gonna say that these have all three angles are congruent. We're gonna say these angles are congruent, we're gonna say these angles are congruent, and we're gonna say those angles are congruent. Based on the definition I told you earlier, is that enough information to know that both whole triangles are congruent? Michael, you're shaking your head. I agree. Why not? We don't know what the numbers are. Okay, yep, I agree with that. Mike, add on to that.
The sides,
What about the sides?
congruent marks on the sides.
We have no congruent marks on the sides. Do you remember our definition earlier? For all we know is it said there's a way to match the vertices, so all corresponding sides and corresponding angles. We have no information about the sides. We cannot say that they're congruent. So must they be congruent? The answer is going to be no. We don't know about the sides. And we can even say the sides measures. We don't know anything about the measurement of the sides. So because we don't know anything about the measurements of the sides, and we'll get into this in the next few days, but I'll do a little bit of notability magic. I can blow this triangle up really big, but the angles are still going to be the same angle measure, right? Don't these two angles still look like they're going to be the same? They both could be that 90 degrees. It doesn't matter how big the sides are. I can shrink this down even tinier if it will let me. But I don't know anything about the sides, but the angles stay the same. So unless we say something about the sides, we do not have enough information. All right, let me stop being normal. Please be normal. There we go. All right, go ahead and flip your paper over. This says to find the values of X. Okay, flip your paper over. Okay. First things first, let's label what we know. What are some things that we know are congruent? Give me two angles that you know are congruent.
V and Y.
I heard V and Y. Awesome. V and Y. Okay. So if I know that V is 67, can I label Y as 67?
Yes.
Sure. They're congruent.
Yes.
Yes, I can. The way you said it was like, you go, girl, go do it. Okay, next one. What are two other angles that are congruent?
U and Z.
U and Z. So if U is 54, do I know anything about Z?
Yes.
Also 54. Amazing. What else do you know?
That has to equal one.
They have to equal 180.
And then besides, then that already have numbers, then W and X will still be.
Exactly. W and X are going to be congruent. And that's something I'm going to go, this we already knew. These things over here, these were kind of given to us. Given U is congruent to angle V, or Z, I mean. What's new is angle X and W are congruent. And I'm writing that new over here, A, because I ran out of room, but B, because I have to name my theorems and postulates that we use. We just learned that theorem and postulate. What is that? What allows me to say those two angles are congruent? Not quite transitive.
Oh, it's third angle theorem.
Third angle theorem, very good. Annabelle, question?
Oh.
Go for it. You're missing out on all the fun we're having, but you can go to the restroom. Okay. All right, now, can we figure out what angle W is?
Yes,
Yeah, how?
by adding all of them up 20.
Adding them all up to 180. Do you remember, we learned about this a few lessons ago. What was the rule that said that all the triangles angles add up to 180? It was kind of a mouthful. It was called triangle angle sum theorem. Do you remember learning that? I think it was 3.5. Triangle angle sum theorem. The name of it might not have stuck with you because it was probably something that you already knew. Okay, so I'm gonna figure out what measure of angle W is, and it's going to be because of the the triangle angle sum theorem. Okay. So if I come over here, I can think of it like 54 plus 67 plus W equals 180. And if I add those up and minus from 180, let me just get my calculator out really quick. 54 plus 67 and then 180 minus that. 59. Okay. I'll get rid of my calculator now. All right, so we knew W and X were congruent by third angle theorem. We knew measure of angle W equals 59 for the third angle sum or the triangle angle sum theorem. Now we want to figure out what X is or Y. No, X.
I think
How do we know? Alex, help me out.
you do, 4x minus 5 is equal to 51.
Exactly. And why are we allowed to do that? Hi, Danny. Oh, yeah, you may need that.
Thank you.
Why are we allowed to set those two equal to each other?
Angle 1 and 2 are congruent.
Not angle 1 and 2, what are they?
Y, D, and then D and U. Sometimes congruent.
Good. And then eventually we got to W and X because of third angle theorem, right? So now that we know what W is, now we're just plugging in, now we're solving. So I've got 4x minus 5 equals 59. So I'm going to add that 5 to both sides and I get 64. And I divide by 4 and I get 16. X equals 16. All right, I don't really need to name a theorem for that one. We doing all right with so far? All right, moving on down. Oh, sorry. All right, if you are good, move on down to the next problem. It says, decide whether the triangles are congruent, justify your reasoning, okay? Decide whether they're congruent. Okay, what do we already know? What's given to us? D and H are congruent, very good. These angles are, all of my sides are, so I can get little marks there, or you can just read that they're there, but I'll just remind us. We're good with all of the sides. We got to figure out if all of the angles are congruent. So we know D and H are. Are there any other angles that are not marked as congruent that we should know? Yeah.
Angle F. I don't know how you would say that big angles you need next to F.
Good. Those two angles at F. Let's name them this way. Let's call it angle DFE. So I went DFE. What would I name the other one? Not G. Since I named D first, we want to do H because it's congruent. H, F, G. So we went D, F, E, and we have to like reciprocate it. We need the matching angles to go together. So H is congruent to D, F is the angle we're talking about, and then G is the last one. And why are they congruent, Mike? You told me they were congruent, but we didn't talk about why.
Vertical angle.
Vertical angles. Now, do I actually know what that angle measure is? I don't know if it's 20 or 52. I don't know what it is. I just know that they're congruent and it's because of my vertical angles, okay? Now, that being said, are there any other angles that we can mark as congruent here? Why are G and E congruent? Third angle theorem. We know that D and H are congruent. We don't know what the angles at F are. We don't know D, F, E, or H and F, G, but we know that they're the same, which means whatever it is, then E and G have to be congruent. A quick little team timeout. Do you guys understand why I can write the pink or the blue angles with just one letter and why I need 3 for those pink ones? Do you guys know why?
In the pink, it was like the whole trying to triangles, and those are just the specific.
It's so like if I say angle E, you guys all know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But if I said angle F, if we labeled these as just F and F, that'd be super confusing, right? Because there's a lot going on at F. So we have to use 3 letters in order to describe those. Is this enough information now to justify whether these are congruent? Remind me, what did it say at the beginning for them to be congruent?
Size and.
Sides and angles, do we have all the sides? Do we have all the angles?
Um,
Yep, it's congruent, so I'm gonna say yes. Congruent, because all corresponding sides and all corresponding angles congruent. Now, when we use the word corresponding here, it's a little different than the way we used it for like a while before. Corresponding just means the ones that match up go together. The ones that go together are congruent. Let's read a congruent statement. I'll write the first one. I'll say triangle DEF is congruent to what? I said triangle DEF. HGF. Awesome. Very good, guys. Triangle HG. All right, we're almost done. Number 5, it says determine whether these triangles are congruent. Justify your reasoning. What do you know already that's congruent?
And then there's
2 angles given to us, those 95s. Yeah, we can label it. Let's call it A, B, C, D, E. I wish I would have thought of a 5-letter word that was. You may. All right, so B and E are congruent. What other angles are congruent? Those 2 angles at C, we can call them angle BCA and angle ECD. What else? Are A and D congruent?
Yeah.
Yeah, why? D and E are congruent and the angles at C are congruent. So why am I allowed to say that A and D are congruent? Third angle theorem, very good. Now we're in a fun little spot. We've got all my angles. Can I mark that any of my sides are congruent? Do I know for sure anything about any of the sides? No. So are these 2 triangles congruent? No. And it's the same reason as before. We don't know anything about the sides. We are going to learn shortcuts tomorrow, but as of right now, if you don't know all of the sides and all of the angles, it doesn't count. It's not congruent. Okay. The very last thing is pretty simple. We've kind of done this already, but it's just a little review of the properties of congruence. And it's talking about our little triangles right here. Okay. So we have these 3 properties. Oh, before I go on, are we okay so far? Everyone's hanging with me? Okay.
Yeah.
These 3 properties we've seen before. We have seen reflexive property. We have seen symmetric property, and we have seen probably most recently the transitive property. All this is saying is what we're used to these properties, they work with triangles, okay? So every triangle is congruent to itself. That's what that first one, reflexive property, says every triangle is congruent to itself. So I can say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABC. Notice that I put it in the exact same order because again, angle A should be congruent to itself, angle B should be congruent to itself, angle C should be congruent to itself. So every triangle in the world, I can say angle ABC or triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABC. That's not a very helpful property, but it is true. Okay. The next one's symmetric. Okay, it says if triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, then what would the symmetric property do? Flip them. So what would I say? Good. Triangle DEF is congruent to triangle ABC. So we can just flip them. I may even use switch them instead of flip because symmetric also starts with an S. So symmetric, switch, or flip, whatever word works for you. And the last one, transitive, we've done pretty regularly. It says if triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF and triangle DEF is congruent to triangle JKL, then what's true? ABC is congruent to JKL. Why did you stop looking? Good, we just cross off that DEF and we can go directly to ABC and JKL. Cross that DEF out. Okay. Yes, Lily. Give me let me do directions really quick and then you may. Okay, that is it for today. Your homework is that one-sider. Okay, we have a little bit more than 15 minutes, so you've got time to do that one-sider. It's only one side, there's no back. Feel free to work with your notes, feel free to work with the neighbor, feel free to ask me questions. This is due next time I see you. This one right here. This is due next time I see you. Okay. Let me stop this video. Oh,